Hello, and welcome back to our Nonprofit Auditor Points. I'm Irina Ryshkova, your nonprofit auditor. In the last episode, we talked about Form 990 and its foundational idea, meaning that the Form 990 is a public document. And it tells the story about your organization to donors, funders, regulators, and general public. Today we're going to continue focusing on the Form 990 and the part that talks about the story of your nonprofit. And the most important, this is not the numbers, it's not the balance sheet, it's not an income statement, not executive compensation, and not the governance policy. The most important storyteller in the Form 990 is the mission and the program accomplishment sections. There are two separate sections, and they can be found primarily in the Part 1 and Part 3 of Form 990. This section is not accounting heavy, but it's very credibility heavy, and it absolutely has to be written by program directors, executive directors, board members, and not your accounting staff. When somebody opens the Form 990 the first time, that's where they start. They want to understand who you are, what you do, what your mission, and whether your activity aligned with your stated mission. Let's start by separating two concepts that often nonprofits blend together. However, they are very different. In the Form 990, they have two separate areas where they present it. First area, it's a mission statement, and you can find it in Part 1, line 1. And it aligns with Part 3, line 1. And it's generally stable from year to year because nonprofits typically don't change their mission. Therefore, if your mission does not change from one year to another year, it makes sense, because most nonprofits operate within the same mission for many years. Some nonprofits never change their mission. For example, the mission could be feeding the hungry, providing education, supporting arts, advancing research in some specific areas, serving vulnerable populations. Those are core purposes, and they do not usually change annually. So if the mission looks similar from one year to another year, it's not a problem. The problem might occur when the same information appear in the program accomplishment section. However, that's completely different story. You can see it's in Part 3, line 4 of Form 990, and it's actually not asking what your organization exists to do in theory. It's not asking about your hopes to accomplish in future. It's asking you specifically what your organization actually did and accomplished during the filing year, which is very critical. So we're not looking in the future, we're not looking in the past, we're looking in the present, what happened this year. And distinction is critical. And it's one of the most confusing areas where the organization unintentionally weaken their Form 990 by copying and pasting their mission. Sometimes nonprofits just simply take copy and paste some program description from last year to this year. And the language may be accurate in general sense, but it does not answer the question that the IRS is actually asking. The Form 990 readers, just for them, the description looks stale, generic, and disconnected from the real activity. But in theory, in real life, nonprofit might have a lot of accomplishments this year, but they just were misunderstanding the questions, or not the right people were answering the question. The IRS instructions are very clear about what they expect to be in each section. So if you open the Google search and you put the 990s instructions, you will see what the IRS is asking. And what they're saying that for each program, service that we report, organization is expected to describe program, services, accomplishments through specific measurements. And it's very critical. Let me repeat it to you. You need to describe program, services, accomplishments through specific measurements. What does it mean? It means that you need to present things such as numbers of clients served, days of care provided, sessions or events that were held, or similar outputs. It needs to be very specific. If the activity involves intangible outcome, like a research or policy work, the organization should describe the activity and objectives for both current period and longer term. So if they connected from one period to another. If exact numbers are not readily available, the IRS does allow to use reasonable estimate, as long as it's clear that the information is estimated. What matters, it needs to be clear, concise, complete, and primary focus. It's a year specific. The IRS is looking for what was accomplished this year. This section should read like a snapshot of what actually happened during the year, not what happened last year, 5 years ago, and not what organization hopes or making plans to achieve in the future. From the reader's perception, that's where nonprofit can either build the confidence or lose the confidence. Strong and specific descriptions suggest active program and real impact this year. Vague language suggests that either it was no accomplishment or it was weak tracking. Both ways are not really helpful to the readers. Now let's look at another section where the most common area of confusion. And that's for each major program, nonprofit needs to provide some numeric information. What is major program? It's up to nonprofit to decide, but if the organization has a specific identifiable program, it needs to be listed in a part 3, line 4, and select 3 major programs. So 3 largest programs needs to be described here. And each program should have 3 numeric fields. First field is expenses, including grants. This represents portion of the nonprofit total expenses that were allocated to that specific program, all expenses. These are not estimated amounts that pull out of the air. They actually have to tie to the organization accounting records and functional expense allocations that are reported on the statement of functional expenses. Very important that the total expenses reported across all programs in a part 3 must agree with the total program served expenses reported on a statement of functional expenses, where you can find on the part 9, column B, line 25. If those numbers are not aligned, it raises a question about consistency and internal reporting. So the first field was total expenses for each program. The second field is grants. This is one of the most misunderstood fields on 990. When it says grants, this line is asking about grants or assistance that were issued by organization to outside recipients as a part of the program activity. It does not refer to the grants that the organization received. It's not a revenue. It's actually grants that were given as a part of expenses. If your nonprofit distributes funds to individuals, subgrantees, to other nonprofit organizations as a part of the activity, those grants will be reported there. If your organization does not issue any grants to individuals or subgrant any funds, this number would be zero, and it's very common that this number is zero, meaning that overall expenses did not include any grants out. And the third field is revenue, which is also very often misunderstood. From the IRS standpoint, revenue considered is earned revenue that is generated by conducting the program activity. So earned revenue for nonprofit would be program fees, ticket sales, membership dues, tuition, other service charges, meaning those are exchange transactions when the nonprofit actually earns funds. It does not include solicited funds like donation, grants, even if they are given for a specific program or restricted by some time and etc. It's not earned revenue. So in the third field, it's actually saying revenue, they're referring to earned revenue. As a result, it's a very common and completely appropriate for the organization that primarily operates on the grants and donation have zero program revenue because they do not generate any revenue from program activities. And it will be zero on the part 3, line 4. To someone who is not familiar with the Form 990, it can look strange. The program is described in detail, expenses are significant, but revenue is zero. So for experienced reader of Form 990, if you see a lot of expenses but revenue is zero, it tells you right away that nonprofit generates funds through contributions and grants. So it's not a red flag to have a zero in revenue. It simply means that the organization's funding model is based on contributed income rather than earned income, and it's pretty common. Understanding these distinctions is important not only for actual reporting, but also how leadership interprets what outsiders might see when they're reviewing the tax return. When part 3 is done well, it connects mission, activity, and financial reality into a coherent story, and then donors will understand how nonprofit is funded, where it generates its revenue, and where this revenue is getting spent. It's either internal expenses or they sub-grant and give grants to others. When this section is done poorly, even strong organizations can appear disorganized or inactive. In this Form 990 series, my goal is not to turn board members and executive directors into tax experts. It's to help nonprofit leaders to understand how the organization is being presented to the world and to the readers of financial information in the Form 990. And often, without realizing what they're reporting to the public, nonprofit can be unintentionally hurt financially. In the next episode, I will move into section that many board members do not even realize that they are directly responsible for, which is governance and oversight. And it's a part 4 of Form 990. That's why IRS pays so much close attention to that part. And a lot of donors do as well. Thank you so much for being here with me. Looking forward to see you for the next nap. Thank you, and be safe and have a wonderful week.